Hi fellow readers, hi my darlings, and welcome back to the newbies. Here I am, already back to embark you on a third video about two standalones novels which do not belong to any series, whereas I usually love it more. Precisely because I like to find a universe, characters, and plots to which I have a tendency to get attached to. So in this video, if I tell you that I like a novel without a sequel, it's because it was able to target all my sensitive spots in only 100 or so pages, while if on the contrary this novel did not know how to touch my little heart, either it would have needed more development in other books, or really it was very badly written, in my opinion, as a non-expert in literary critique, but a great reader in my spare time, like anyone who is here to, watch and get some content, some recommendations, and some feedbacks on their favorite books. So I'm going to start with a classic of English literature that I wanted to read for pure pleasure only, not because it was submitted to me by my schools or my studies. So once I saw the film just before the period of COVID and lockdown to the cinema, right before they closed, with my boyfriend of its most recent adaptation, which I wanted to see at first mostly because of its casting, with Emma Watson, our Hermione, playing Meg, Meryl Streep, our iconic fashion devil from the film The Devil Wears Prada, who plays Aunt Marsh, and the one who played Wanda in the adaptation of my favorite standalone novel, which I talked about already in my first video of the kind, The Host, and who plays Jo, aka the main character in this movie once more. In addition, there was a third actress with the main role of Amy in this film, whose title I have not yet revealed, but you probably guessed it if you have great literary culture. She became also very well known as she joined the MCU in the role of Yelena, aka the sister of Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow. But hey, enough fangirling. The film, the movie, and the book is called Little Woman. And this movie, directed by Greta Gerwig, also the director of the Barbie movie currently in theaters, which I have already saw, but has not moved me as much as this story had, which I intend to tell you all about. The ending has been modified from the book, but it is because she, the director, wanted to draw inspiration from the life of the author, with none other than Louisa May Alcott, because it is an ode to her work and to her lifestyle as a woman and a writer in the 1800s, So, you have to remember that I had a pretty big slump period of 2 years or 3 around my high school experience until September 2022. Well, actually, I tried to go back to reading earlier than that, at least during my short week of vacation in April in 2022, yet again, when I went with my mother to an island to be able to start reading a beautiful copy of the novel in the original language in English, which was offered to me at Christmas, I believe, with another exemplar of Pride and Prejudice, and it is right at the top of my bookshelves, but you can't see it with like the way I am filming this. I am planning the camera. Yet getting started was complicated, and although frankly I had a format that made me want to, I could no longer immerse myself and stay focused for hours on a fiction without like screens. So I remember that at the end of this week in paradise, I stopped my reading after only like about 50 pages done, and that's why I therefore went back to it only at the beginning of September. And even though I had no excuses like school or work, because I had plenty of free time, I finished it in 20 days. So that was like a long time for only 358 pages. But you know, everyone has their own rhythm, and mine was really slow because I was starting yet again to get myself involved into the book community, and I needed for that first to finish those that were in my TBR and that I already owned before, like, you know, jumping to new stuff. So I don't know if it's because I set myself the bar too high for a respawn with an English read, or a slightly old style classic that isn't always perfectly to my taste with the way it's written, like in such long sentences, and sometimes like the plots are not that impressive and they spend too much time on the little details that really this time I do not care about, and does not develop as much romances because it was more taboo. Or I don't know if that's because I already knew the film's end and therefore I was not curious to figure out how the ending would go, because like I was already kind of spoiled. But I had chosen it precisely because it intrigued me to access the thoughts and the development of the relationships, normally more detailed in the books than in the movies I had seen and loved. I thought that therefore the book I would as well, because the adventures between the sisters, the adorable romances that are created, and the tragic yet realistic way the evolution goes in this story is what I liked so much during the viewing and that I wanted to deepen in my reading. Actually, the book focuses on a long time on the first of these 3 points, and it's only when you reach like 3/4 of the book that the other points are present, like the romance and the more sad ending kinda. But somehow the movie, which changed like the chronology and the order of the way the pace of the story is getting presented to the viewers. In fact, it done those moments I liked, those two last points, more justice, I believe, than the handwritten story, because like I said, it's not the classics and old style written books. Fair point. Bravo. Mon précieux livre en format très rare. Oui. Aww, it's him with whom I went to see the movie. Anyway, so the author, that was a quick sneak peek of my boyfriend. The author had published her story in 1868, I believe, and there were other adaptations in movies before the one I adored back in 2019, such as those in 1994, in 1933, and in 1949, that I have never seen, I must admit. And this novel is classified as a comedy, The genre are fiction of learning for children, and it is much like the Sophie's Misfortunes or Diary of a Wimpy Kid or even Anne of Green Gables, except this is considered even more a historical one given its like time of publication. It's kind of like obvious. I am lucky, as I told you, to have this beautiful manuscript, which also contains imitations of handwritten, like this right here, but here I think it's a journal, it's a newsletter. I don't think it's a proper letter, but it's the one like that they invented as sisters. So you see all that. So imitations of handwritten correspondence recreated by the publisher in order to give us the illusion that the story really took place and that these characters did indeed write these letters or even existed. So although I already knew the ending, the version of the novel also brought tears to my little eyes, that little green innocent eyes that like were like doubtful of how the story could be better than the movie I really loved. Perhaps even more than the version of the film, precisely because I was able to pay attention to all the warning signs, the foreshadowings, or even because the innocence and the true bond of the sisters seemed to be even more deepened in this book, which is what I was looking for. With that being said, though, I guess it's because it was modernized by the feminist director, but the romances or even the final fate of the protagonists seemed less significant to me in the book. That's not a problem at all. It remains, after all, a very sweet story that I recommend discovering for like me having at least one sincerely appreciated literature classic on your list of reads. So, you know, I know people can sometimes like classics, but most of the time people read them only because it is like a must. And I believe this one, I didn't feel forced to read it, especially because I took like my real time and my own rhythm to read it, but also because I kind of enjoyed it a lot. It was such a sweet, such a good, like nice and not that difficult to read book. It's just sometimes a bit long, but I guess I am also thankful for the movie because I don't know if I would have all done that well without the movie. So I will no longer claim to have incredible literary skills that would allow me to judge this bookish masterpiece, and will therefore move on to the presentation of a much less known novel, more modern and far from being a classic one, but all the same easier and funny to read, I would say. I believe. I don't remember it perfectly, but I believe it was like a fun read. So I don't know if you remember this movie released in 2015 about a whatsoever looking girl who's been friends for years with two bombshells and realizes at a high school party, thanks to her neighbor, the pretentious, good-looking and popular jock from school, that she is actually seen as a so-called designated ugly fat friend, whose purpose is only to help the guys to get closer to her gorgeous best friends and also boost her bestie's looks even more just by standing next to them. And she tries during the rest of the movie to get rid of her role by following the advice of the said rather handsome douche whom she unexpectedly grew close to. Yes, it was slightly a tiny teensy bit inspired by the book with the same title, that is The Duff. So it was written by Cody Keplinger, and the way our main character learns how the boys at school view her, comparing to her two magnificent friends, is the only similar plot point of the story between the book and the movie. Everything else happening afterwards is completely different in both versions. I had seen the movie first and looked for the books when I figured out about 1 or 2 years maximum after that it existed and served as the inspiration of the movie, which I loved. But hey, the book is a little less innocent, since the relationship between our protagonist and the sportsman is first really sexual before becoming sorta romantic. I particularly remember this detail. A few scenes that are quite definitely more out there than the movie, which is unusual. I don't know why. Normally it's the other way around. Also, in the novel, we learn more about the family life of the two characters and about the romantic and sexual past of our protagonist, of our main character. And it's kind of touching because the movie is more based on the comedy, whereas the book stands more serious-ish. And this passage really made me feel like it was preventing and warning young readers about age gaps when you are in middle school or high school, how it isn't particularly healthy at that age. Sometimes 4 years gap doesn't seem that much for adults, but when you're children, it's a whole lot. So yeah, that is to say that where the film can be seen by an 11 years old with no problems, the book has indeed done well to be read by me, myself and I at 14 years old, because the spice is certainly for us adults now moderate, but it is there, contrary to the movie where there is no suggestive thing at all. And that is not really what I would recommend to read for preteen. But your parents, you have your own tolerance, and I did read stuff pretty early and I am not traumatized, but it's still in my mind for some stuff because it's such a turning point to read about more adultish stuff, So I'm still happy with the changes though. It's as if I had matured with these two versions, because the movie was a bit childish, funny. It was perfect for the preteen that I was, and the book was an opening for me to more suggestive readings that were not toxic and still felt like sex is not to be too taboo about. I don't know if I formulated this quite right. So it still is a high school romance, but it's considered young adult because of the smutty little things. You have to know that before you start it, let's say. You can't expect it to be just like the movie, okay? I don't know if I've fathomed that enough for you, but I hope I did. So it's about childhood friends turned enemies with reputation, each mistakenly stuck on them, who became somewhat partners with benefits and begin to secretly have feelings for each other when they start confiding in each other and enjoying a little too much the distraction, the peaches, the cherries, the eggplants from their respective families, but not also the eggplants, but also the smile, the eyes, the look, the simple touch. from their respective families that this sort of relationship they share represents. Now, I told you I put in this video 2 standalone books, meaning that they do not belong to a series at all. Well, let's say that's because for a long time I really believed that it was an independent story. I thought the author likes to write and is specialized in writing teenage romance where characters overcome prejudices and form an unexpected duo, because I have read a second novel by her, which I will talk about in a future video of this style, but I didn't realize it was not just another romance about another couple from the same high school, because actually she literally made a series out of unrelated romances and couples called Hamilton High. That is like the school where these stories happen in. I just figured that out from my recent discoveries on Goodreads when I was like classifying my books that I've read and putting stars on the number of stars I believe they deserved, according to my opinion, on each of them. And that's when I saw the grey link above it and I was like, no, do not tell me there was a series and I've missed it. Well, I did, but I didn't. This is therefore the first volume, Death, of this series, and it was published in 2010. And I later read the last novel, actually, of this series, being the fourth one of the series, and it was published in 2015, without knowing that she had also written 2 other volumes in the meantime, in between, which belonged to this series, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together that they were actually a series and they were connected, even though some people, now that I recall it, mentioned that they knew a couple whose story happened was actually the Duff one. Here, they can be read independently because I never actually figured that one out. I'm not that stupid, don't worry, you can be perfectly content to read this novel alone, whether it is the first one, the Duff, or the last one, which I will mention in another video, so I won't name it or give the title away. But in truth, it is not completely considered out of any series. So I have a pass for now on this video, but I preferred for it to be like honest. I read it as a standalone, so therefore for a long time and still now somehow I cannot put that out of my mind that it is not a standalone, but I believe and I believed it was a standalone. You get it? Kinda? Yep, that's it. Now that this blender is over, I think once again that I've said everything there was to say about this book. The 2 got to me both for really different reasons. In conclusion, you can't accuse me of not being a versatile reader. You can drop your comments if you liked the video, if you knew these books, if you liked them, and if not, why? Or even if you did, do share with me your favorite passages. And if you didn't know them, if thanks to my little presentation they now are intriguing you or not, Tell me what I have to change or improve if this video is not to your complete liking. I welcome any feedback. I'm ready to answer any question too, so honestly, you don't have to be shy. I've got plenty of time to respond, to answer, to give feedback if you have anything crossing your mind that you can type. With that last note, I'm going to go back to my Kindle. I wish you all to have good readings until our next weekly reunion on Sundays. Bye bye!